Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Whale Nerds Podcast. This is episode number 94. My name is Slater, and I'm here with Adam and Caitlin.
What's up?
Hello.
You couldn't keep us away
Dude.
for long.
What?
We're not late.
You were
They're late to listening.
You weren't on the last one.
Yeah,
Last
you
one was
did
a
miss the
mini-sode.
last one.
It was my mom's birthday, and I was not here.
Yeah, no, that's important. It's allowed. All you missed out is
it was
Erica
important.
and I giggling at each other for no reason because we're like middle school girls every time we see each other.
True. I felt like I just kind of sat there during the episode and was just like listening
That happened last time.
and appreciating.
Caitlin and her friends just leave us in the dust.
I'm sorry. I don't know what it is about her and I, but we just like can't contain ourselves when we hang out together. So yeah, that's kind of one of my like pre topics announcements is that Erica's book is on sale. If you listen to Minisode 11, you heard all about it. If not, you can go back and listen to it. And if you want to check out her book about the plastic crisis in our oceans, Thicker Than Water is on sale in many places. So check it out if you are interested. But I also just wanted to say thank you to all of our supporters, whether it's via Patreon or if you came on our trip, or if you tell people about the podcast. I just wanted to make sure that was right up at the top. Thank you for supporting us. We're coming up on, is it our third birthday in a couple months? Is that right? Yeah, it is. Yeah. So
Golf clap to our supporters.
yeah. And if you want to support us, we have a couple ways that you can either do that in person or you can actually order merch through our website now. So we just launched, right now what's available in our shop on our website, which is thewhalenerds.com, is stickers, which are our different logos that were designed by Samantha Chang of S. Chang Studios. And so you can check those out and we'll have more items available over the coming months, maybe for the holiday season, but maybe not. We'll see what happens. No guarantees.
Get it ready before then.
Stay tuned. And then we also have trips coming up in the spring. So if you want to come see, hopefully killer whales, but lots of whales in Monterey Bay with us in April, we have trips on the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of April with Blue Ocean Whale Watch. So
I'm so excited for that. It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah.
Adam has to take my boat out every morning to go find the killer whales before the trip.
In the dark.
Dude, don't think, if you give me the opportunity, I will do it. I'll sniff
But our
them
trip
out.
leaves at 7:30 in the morning. He's gonna have like
I
no
can
time.
sniff them out. I'll sniff them out. Don't worry about it.
You're gonna have to be
Well,
coming in.
realistically, this is what's gonna happen. The first day we're gonna go out there, the CA-51s are gonna be right outside the Moss Landing Bell buoy. We're gonna be like, oh my god, like where'd you guys come from? And that's it. And then we're set.
Speaking of sniffing them out, I got to tell you one thing real quick, even though we're not doing sightings.
We are doing
We're
sightings
doing
on this
sightings.
one. Yeah, we are doing
Oh.
sightings
Stinker.
on this one.
Well, then let's cut to the chase here.
Oh
ladies and
my
gentlemen.
Okay.
I'm going
So-
first.
Well, okay, so let's just frame that since you already brought it up. So this episode is part one of a two-part episode. And so on this episode, we'll talk about our sightings, but then we're going to record part two pretty quickly after. So it'll go out the following week. But since we will have not been on the water since we had last recorded the part two, there won't be sightings in that second episode. But the first episode, we have sightings. So Slater, what did you see?
Whales. You guessed it. Two different species of whales. Humpback whales and killer whales. But first, let me get to the humpbacks. So like 4 days ago, or I don't know how many days ago, I went out and it was really like super foggy. I texted you about it, right? It was like I had like 50 feet of visibility or less.
Yeah.
And I just kind of went across all my track numbers from the like previous days, and I ended up finding a mom and calf like literally in like 50 feet of visibility. I was just going slow like forever. Anyways, I found them, but every time they fluked up right when I found them. So my go-to move was just shut the boat down and listen. And every single time I would drive to them and get to them for two breaths, they would fluke and go down again. So it was like a very tough trip. Like I think the toughest trip I've had yet. And it wasn't because there was no whales. It was just because of the fog.
Yeah.
And so it led me for like at least an hour. I was able to stay with them and kind of like get up to them and then see them go down in the fog and lose them. Well, I'm listening and I felt like I was like, oh no, because if you miss them, you're like, uh-oh. Like if they get too far on that second breath, you know what I mean? Or that second sequence, you're not going to hear them. Well, I heard a breath and I was like, it's kind of faint. And I went to it. I ended up losing the mom and baby pair and I found a single, but he was staying down for like 10 minutes or something. And so I ended up losing all my whales in the fog.
At least you found some.
And there was literally like 8 whales 1 mile from the harbor. So after all of this, like searching the bay in the fog, the fog ended up backing off from the beach first because the easterly wind in the morning, it like pushed it out. And yeah, there was a bunch of whales right in front of the harbor. So that was pretty exciting. We have had killer whales the last week or so. I saw them yesterday. I had to go 12 miles. Actually, I caught them at like 13 and a half miles. And I stayed with them. They were doing basically like 8 knots the whole entire time. And I left them at 17 and a half miles from home.
Sheesh.
Yeah, but they were breaching. Like when I got there, they breached while I was there. I got 0 photos to prove it. Somebody had to have.
I thought you said you got like a half breach.
I did. It's out of focus though. When I looked at on the back of the camera, I was like, okay, that's good enough.
Yeah.
And then I get home and it was like so soft. I was like, wow,
yeah,
it sucks. But I felt bad because Kate had been with them for a while and I didn't know what they had seen at like she had been with them for a lot longer before I got there. And she left pretty much like 10 minutes after I got there and they started breaching. But I didn't say anything on the radio. But come to find out, she had like multiple spy hops, breaches, and she didn't get any of them either. I think it was just because a lot of them were like out of the back. Behind swells or out of the back. It was so weird. There was like a south swell, but then there was east wind. And so like, I don't know. It was weird. It was super washer machiney. But yeah, it's been really good. We still had, I saw 3 humpbacks on my way in from the killer whales yesterday. And then Danny found 6 to 8 whales in Marina off the beach, like in like 100 or between like 60 and 100 feet of water. So there's still quite a bit of whales around, at least a dozen or so. And then I missed 3 days of northern right whale dolphins, whiteside dolphins. And it's funny to hear them talk about it. They're like, I don't like to estimate dolphins, but I would say 1,000, I think. Like Bill's like, I'm not good at this, but I think there's like at least 600 whitesides here and, a couple hundred northern right whale dolphins.
Wow, that's cool.
Like I get super blue water. I asked my people, they didn't want to go to the dolphins. They wanted humpbacks, which I understand. Sometimes, you're there for a certain thing. So, but yeah, I missed out on the dolphins and it's definitely a Troll Pro moment for us, Adam.
We got to get it for the doc.
Even though Caitlin's an expert troll
dude, we need Caitlin there because I've tried it multiple times and it's tough.
Well, okay.
I think you should have a big pot of dolphins.
Well, the other thing is it's different species like it better than others. So like common dolphins don't give a flying hoot about it. They're like, whatever, and they just keep doing what they're doing. Yeah. But like Pacific white-sided dolphins are all about it. They're like, what's this thing? What's it doing? It's making noise. Yeah. It has lights on it. And they just like get right up in it.
I bet you if you got a big enough group of comments, someone would come over and check it out.
Maybe, or also just the odds of them swimming by it are higher just because there's more of them. And then killer whales, it depends. Sometimes they're like really curious about it. And other times they're like, I don't give a crap what you're towing.
Killer whales on the Troll Pro?
We had a really curious group of killer whales with some young ones in there. They had been like chasing birds and chasing northern fur seals and like playing with the boat. And so I was like, they're being pretty curious. And so I put it in the water and they like came over and like touched it. They like tried to bite it. And I was like, oh my God, we're done. When I saw its mouth open from the back of the boat, I was like, reel it in. We're done.
God,
dude, I would die. Caitlin, I would die. I just want you to know.
If we could go back to if we could take 4K 120 back to when Caitlin was in her filmmaking days.
Oh man, that's so cool.
Yeah, I don't know if I could handle the equipment you guys have. I'd be like, this is too much for me.
It's all right. The new GoPro, you just same thing. Press a button.
It was a GoPro 3 that I filmed that on.
Oh my gosh, now we're on the 10. That's funny. That doesn't make you feel old. I don't know what does.
Caitlin, you really haven't been whale watching a whole lot lately, right?
No, so our season's done. We ended on October 24th. Unfortunately, we had planned to go through Halloween, but we had a really big storm come through. Like, you guys heard about me like going through a hurricane. This nor'easter was way worse than both hurricanes we had this year. Like, out at the lighthouse, it gusted to 79 miles an hour in the middle of the night on the worst night. Yeah. Like, it was way
I remember you
worse.
sent us the screenshots.
Yeah, it was. I was waking up every couple hours because like the windows were rattling, and I kept being like, "Oh my god, the boat's blowing away!" Like,
That's so scary.
so yeah, and it like ripped the leaves off the trees. There was like trees down everywhere. A lot of places in the outskirts of the city and like in Rockport didn't have power, and so yeah, it was pretty gnarly. So we got cut short a week, but kind of had to sit around on standby just in case like the weather did clear up. But right after the nor'easter, like a big ugly southeast storm came through too, which for us, like if it's coming from the east, like there's no land buffer, and so the sea conditions get really, really bad. Before we ended our season, we did have some really nice encounters with a humpback whale named Dross and her calf. And Dross is doing her like she makes more of like a P-shaped loop, or even, but then it kind of crosses itself, so it's more like like Jamie calls it like a lasso, but it's kind of like an intersecting circle when she bubble nets. And she was feeding really close to the surface, so you get to see the herring flying out of the water, which was really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was really nice to see her, and the calf was practicing too, but also sometimes just like swimming through the bubbles, which was kind of funny to watch, probably because the bubbles felt funny. So yeah, that was kind of how we wrapped up our season. So now we're just winterizing the boat, getting it ready to sit for a couple months before season starts again in April. So yeah, but that's what's going on here.
Adam,
Yes.
have you seen anything?
Yes. It's been great here. It's starting to slow down a little bit. Obviously, the humpbacks are moving south. But we still have a good amount. We've been having like 6 to 8 on every trip. But we've been getting a lot of reports from the Eastern Channel, where this whole season they've been in the Western Channel. So we're not seeing like the big numbers of like 20 or like 35 that we had for a couple of days, but they're definitely thinning out, but there's still a good amount here. Seeing a bunch of common dolphins, and we did have a sighting of killer whales. The killer whales were the same killer whales that you saw. We saw them 5 days before they were reported in Monterey. They're the 140Bs, which is her name. The matriarch's name is Luis. And it was cool just to kind of see them travel, like, I think it was like 250 miles in about 5 days, which we had another group of killer whales earlier in the year that you and I saw that also popped up to Santa Barbara. It was like the same story. It was like 250 miles in 4 days, which is pretty cool. So that was cool. It was a really quick encounter with them that we had. We got a report of them at the end of our trip. And it was kind of funny. It kind of sucked. The person that called us in on them, they killed a dolphin a common dolphin right before we got there and killed it and ate it. And this guy has a video like right off the front of his boat of like one of the whales doing like a mini backflip with with a dolphin in its mouth. Yeah. And then of course, when we arrived on scene, they like were traveling at like, they were down for like 10 minutes, traveling a mile underneath the water. And then when we left, we put our buddy on them, and they did the same thing. So they killed a sea lion right after we left. So it's just like funny, the timing, I think it's kind of the beautiful thing about the ocean is that the timing can be a blessing. It can also be a curse sometimes.
There's only a handful of pods I've ever seen hunt dolphins, and the 140s are one of them.
Really? There you go.
Yeah, the 51s. The 140s are also very efficient gray whale killers. At least they were when Luis was like still with Emma. They could take a gray whale down in 30 minutes.
It's crazy.
It's like
I need to look up who the killer whales were that ate that white-sided dolphin when
it was with Nadia.
No, this is with in 2016.
Oh, I think it was the 140s. Really? I think I was out of town when that happened. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's Luis's mom. So
yeah.
Dude,
Adam, speaking of like just being late to the party for the killer whales, eating. Yesterday I'm at the Fuel Dock, and then like the guy was like just up by like doing some gardening up above, and I'm like, dude, like get down here. Like I gotta feel my boat and get out. And so like I was like, okay, I can't wait for him. I'm gonna walk up and get him. So I start walking, and then he sees me, he waves, and I'm like, okay, thank you. Like so, he's coming down, and on the radio, I hear Bill go, "Wow, that was beautiful." And like and like to hear them say stuff like that, it's just like, okay, well. And then he goes, "That was 2 killer whales breaching at the same time," and I was like, oh my god, like, like I'm hearing all this, and I'm like, okay, I already knew I was 12 and a half miles away. And
yeah, so you're just like,
yeah, and
it's brutal. I mean, it's just funny.
Right before that, he goes, Danny's like, oh, there's a humpback here. Oh, there's 3 humpbacks. Oh, the killer whales are so that like they circled humpbacks for a second.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then they double breached at the same time, and I was like, oh god, what's going on? Like, obviously knew they weren't gonna eat them or like hunt them.
Yeah,
but I just was like,
It's
you
so
never
cool.
know. You'll get the humpbacks in the middle of them, peck slapping and tail throwing. And
I've
like,
seen Comet breach on top of a humpback when she was, I mean, she's still really little, but when she
She's
was
still
really
tiny.
little, oh my God, she breached right on top of one. I was like, what
That's
are
so
you
funny. Yeah, timing's everything out in the ocean. It's like our Rizzo's dolphin hunt. Like we were about to go in, but we turned around. We got the call. You just never know how it works out.
you just gotta go to the bathroom.
Exactly. Sometimes you gotta go to the bathroom.
And then like just forgot about it as soon as you heard that there were killer whales.
Yeah, didn't need to do that anymore. I did have a really cool sighting of a humpback whale that was seen off of one of the Hawaiian Islands that was seen here. And I think that's definitely the first whale I've ever had that was seen out there. And it was cool to just talk about that on the boat, about how like the different populations, there's not a whole ton of intermingling, but it does happen, so that was cool. It was a whale that was seen in like 1991, really old, like kind of an older whale for us. And
Not
cool
really old, Adam.
No, definitely not really old, but I think the oldest whale I've seen is like from like 1981. But like you have whales that were seen in like what, 73 or something.
I think I have one
Taylor.
like around there, 79 or 78 or something like that.
So were you able to use the Happy Whale tool to make the ID on the boat?
Yes.
Oh,
I've been
that's
using
cool.
that a lot.
Nice.
And it's
yeah,
cool
all day.
because I do a lot of the naturalizing on the boat now. So I'll just be like, we're like participating in brand new research on this boat, and we have an opportunity to be able to ID these whales instantly, essentially. And so I can talk a little bit about each whale and where it's been seen and their catalog. And people have actually really enjoyed it. They like seeing, knowing the history of the whale. So shout out Ted. Thanks for that.
Yeah. So I don't think we've talked about it on the podcast. We talked a little bit about it when Ted was on the boat for Whale Nerds Weekend, but Happy Whale's coming out with a new tool for people that are like regular users that would find it helpful to be able to make an ID on the fly without making a submission. So that's an option that's starting to work its way out to folks that are high frequency users of Happy Whale. So if that's something you're interested in, you could reach out to them and see what the requirements are. But you'll get to hear, especially from Adam and Slater, that they're like making IDs while they're on the water without having to go through the full submission process, which makes it really cool to be able to give like the sighting information right there on the boat.
Yeah. It's super helpful, and it's super fun too. Yeah, it's just cool to like have that at your disposal.
Yeah, I went back and was just checking through IDs, and then I found just the same week that you found yours, but you just found yours. I found an ID from 2017 that was seen in Monterey, Alaska, and Hawaii. And
whoa, really?
And that's it. Yeah,
That's super cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Ted Cheeseman calls, or he messaged me. He's like, "Are you sure you were in Monterey? Because it's super foggy, and then like the image is like it's straight fog that we're whale watching in." And I was like, "Well, I've never been to Alaska, and I hadn't been to Maui yet until like 2 years after this image was shot." So I was like, "It's for sure from Monterey."
What time of year was the image from?
It was our 2017 in like spring or something.
I feel like in the spring and in the fall is when you're going to catch those weird ones.
Yep, that's why all the whales right now had not either been seen in the very beginning of summer, and they kept going to like Fair Lawns and stuff, or they haven't been seen since like 2020. They're all so random right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten a lot of like it's. I want them to be new, but it's like you saw this one in 2020 or 2019. I'm like, dang it, but it's cool. But I'm trying to fucking catch Adam over here.
Sorry, dude. Never happened. Never,
Like-
ever, ever.
Pokemons,
Dude, I'm
but
like
it's
8 away.
humpbacks.
I'm like, get away.
When you grow your hair this long, maybe you'll catch me then.
Dude. Adam's hair grows like a chia pet or whatever. Chia. You know what I'm talking about?
My sister used to call me that when I was little.
Oh my goodness.
Call me a chia pet. It's funny.
All right, should we get into it?
Let's get into it.
Okay. So this is sort of a older event that happened, but I think it kind of ties together nicely across the 2 episodes that we're going to do. So the state of California did have an oil spill recently, and it happened at the beginning of October. And I just like following this story, I've just been like, can we just like get over fossil fuels? Like, can we just figure it out already? Like,
I know, right?
especially like when you fast forward to like several months later, the COP26 outcomes have been just like substandard. It's like, seriously, people, like that we have the ability to get past this. That was like my main like takeaway from this. But basically what happened in Southern California was they think that a anchor drag, so like a pipeline fouling happened from a ship's anchor that was waiting to come into port. And when they first covered the story, they thought it was like a new incident that had happened because the port of LA had been so backed up because of like the working shortages and COVID conditions and like, you know, just a whole bunch of things compounding at once. And then the more they learned about it, the more they changed their story. It was like just watching it over several weeks, it was pretty interesting to see the response, because they initially were like, you know, 200,000 gallons of oil has been spilled. And then by the time the news article came out, they're like 126,000 to 156,000. And really, if you read like the play-by-play of like, people could smell it on shore at night. No one started doing anything till almost lunchtime the next day. Like the response delay from the Coast Guard was like crazy. And also from the oil company, because they detected a pressure loss in that pipeline like during the night and didn't do anything until like 9 o'clock the next morning. So then you keep watching the news stories go around, and now the estimate's more like it was actually 25,000 gallons. So a lot less than the initial report said. And they think that the damage actually occurred in January of 2021. So they went and inspected the area of the pipeline failure, and there's no recent signs of like sediment disturbance, and the anchor drag probably occurred like way back in January. So it was like, what? Kind of a weird story when you watch it all unfold over time.
Yeah, super weird.
But, you know, obviously not great. Harbors were closed for several days following the spill, or like weren't allowing incoming traffic. Like there was lots of oil booms out, and people were pretty worried about, you know, public safety and beach safety and the animals. And so kind of ugly. So then it got me thinking, like, so what happens to animals when they go through an oil spill, right? Because like, especially off Santa Barbara, how often do you see a slick at the surface?
Oh, every single day.
All the time, right?
Every single day.
But like a big crude oil spill is, you know,
it's different.
Yeah. So I found this article that just had come out within the last, I don't know, couple weeks. And it was about, let's see, it came out in, where's my link?
Scientists still following whales that swam through oil.
Yeah, so the publication is like public broadcast for Kenai Peninsula type news thing. I don't have the name of it right off my hand, but it's like KDLL is the short name of it. So this is a story that came from Alaska during the Exxon Valdez oil spill, which actually happened, I think, before all of us were born. And so what happened was, this was like a tanker that spilled on its way into port, and it's an Alaska-based study, and it's studying this population of transient killer whales called Chugach, I think is how you say it, transients from the Gulf of Alaska. There used to be 22 whales in this group. I think it's like 2 family lines, and they swam directly through the spill in 1989, all 22 whales. by the next year, 9 whales were dead and others were missing. And now in 2021, there's only 7 whales left. And they have not had any calves since the oil spill.
Yeah.
So pretty
Wow.
gnarly. It's like
They know that all by IDs.
yeah, they've been doing so this research group has been funded by a compensation fund from the Exxon Valdez spill. And so they've been doing these like follow-up studies of different aspects of the environment post oil spill that's been funded by the company responsible. And so they've been monitoring these killer whales like on a dedicated effort because they've had grant funding to do it. And so they're actually not going to get funding moving forward. It has been quite a while since the oil spill, but I mean, it's kind of like they have far-reaching effects, so I feel like they should still have to fund it. Yeah,
Why?
there's only 7
How have
whales
I
left.
never heard of that?
I didn't know about the killer whale thing. I knew about the Exxon Valdez oil.
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah.
I
don't
didn't
how
know
I've
about it
never heard of
either.
that.
But
Wait, there was 22.
22.
9
The-
died.
the first year,
Damn. And now how many's left?
7,
And they haven't had babies since.
and they haven't had any calves since.
So it
Well, I
might have
mean, I
messed
think
up
that
the
would-
reproductive stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That seems like it.
I mean, crude oil is pretty toxic.
So
Like,
what, they ate it? They put it in their mouths?
I mean, I don't know.
They
They
swim
just
right through
Probably
it.
open their mouths
swim
all the
right
time,
through
I
it.
guess.
But
Think about
also
their
like
eyes.
there's
The
like
food
vapor.
they're eating.
Yeah, there's also like vapor that comes off the water. So like when
They
it's
could've
floating at the
breathing
surface
in.
and they're breathing it, and then they were just like it was all over their skin, which I think there probably still does have a way to get into their bloodstream when you're like that highly
absolutely.
exposed. I mean, it was a lot of oil in the water, so to swim directly through the spill, like,
And I'm sure
that's
all the food
bad.
they were eating, it biomagnified probably up the food chain.
Yeah,
That's awful.
That
It's
sucks.
it's
yeah,
it's just interesting. Like obviously crude oil, I think is a different story, but like here in Santa Barbara, like I've said it before, like we'll see giant oil slicks, you know, and
Yeah.
we'll see a pod of dolphins moving through it. We'll see whales going through it. And you know, that's a natural process. It's a natural thing. It's oil seeping through cracks in the sea floor that bubbles to the surface.
mhm,
You know, so you know, the channel has been an extremely productive zone for whatever, it's probably thousands of years, you know.
mhm. And the oil's been seeping for that same
and the
amount
oils
of time.
exactly, and that hasn't changed. So when you look at it in that regard, like that natural oil, it doesn't seem to have that much of an effect on them. But when you look at crude oil and stuff like that, and you know, there's a report of oil off of San Diego earlier this year that I think was really blown out of proportion. But I mean, who knows really the effect at the end of the day?
Well, and I think it has to do with like concentration and also like
yeah,
how
absolutely.
novel the chemicals are to those animals, right? Like
Yeah,
maybe there is something that common dolphins have developed over time to better combat the chemical
Exactly.
exposure, whereas these killer whales had never
whales-
been exposed to this, and all of a sudden it was
Exactly.
like an enormous amount.
well, and then it's also like, I think you could look at the species as well. Like I think,
Mhm.
you know, the lower trophic levels probably aren't as affected as
Yeah.
you know, killer whales at the tip of the top, right? So
Yep.
they're
Yep.
that biomagnification really plays a fact.
Yeah. Well, and they also have a lot longer reproductive period. And
Uh-huh.
so like their biological processes are a little bit different than other dolphin species. Like, you know, they're pregnant for 18 months almost. And so
Yep.
like I think
wonder
being exposed has farther reaching effects on an animal like that.
I wonder if that pod's ever been like recorded with stillborns or anything like that, or if they just haven't had anything. You know, it's something.
I would
like
have to
look into.
follow like the actual research group's
Researchers,
page. Yeah, this was just like a news article that came up from their local area.
Gotcha.
But let me see if the name of the research group is listed in there. They're scientists from Homer and Seward, North Gulf Oceanic Society. So it's part of
Surprised I
one of the
I've
collaborators.
Surprised I've never seen Emma talk about that.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to
Emma-
ask her
Emma
about
Luck.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're funded by the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council. And the civil suit that came out of the oil spill was a $900 million fund And that's like the funds that were drawn on to do this study for over this long period of time. But it sounds like they're not going to continue the funding. I don't know if it's because the fund's running out or if they've just like shifted priorities or whatever, but pretty compelling, pretty interesting to see such a long period of time with such horrible effects on these animals.
Yeah, that's bad.
So that's kind of it for the doom and gloom. Now we're going to shift to like more of a happier note to end on to lead us into part 2.
Woohoo!
So the reason why I wanted to like bring all this up and like show the effects of fossil fuels is because when you flip this whole concept on its head, like fossil fuels are driving this enormous climate change cycle. The industrialization of the world is fueling this, right? But whales work against this effect.
That. Yeah.
Right? So like whales are cultivating our oceans, they're gardening and fertilizing our oceans. And so there's this cool article that came out about a Chilean biologist, but it like took the focus of like whales generate and promote life is the title of the article from Pew Trust. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. So this researcher that they interviewed, it's just like a simple question and answer type article. But if you look at like what he's talking about Chilean blue whales. And they think that now that they've kind of teased out the details of Chilean blue whales, that they were hunted to 1% of their pre-whaling population by 1966, which is pretty incredible. But whales act as carbon sinks for our oceans. Like, what the heck is a carbon sink, right? A carbon sink is anything that absorbs more carbon from the atmosphere than it releases. So like plants, when they go through respiration, they do still release carbon dioxide. But when they're photosynthesizing, they consume more carbon dioxide than they're putting out by respirating. So, or respiring. I don't know, whichever one's the right word. So like burning of fossil fuels or volcanic eruptions, those are examples of like a carbon source. But like whales, plants, soil, those are all carbon sinks. Yeah. So whales generate and promote life, which is like the whole concept of the whale pump, right? That's like got to be one of my most favorite theories of ocean nutrient movements ever.
Yeah,
so
super cool.
So basically like when whales are feeding, they're feeding at depth. When they're pooping at the surface, and that's where all your phytoplankton is. So they're fertilizing the phytoplankton and then feeding into this cycle of sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. So
photosynthesis.
Yeah. Exactly. Just like plants on land. They just float around in the ocean instead.
Just like that SpongeBob episode. Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. No? You guys don't remember that? Am I too young for you?
No, I watched SpongeBob as a kid.
Okay, good.
I did SpongeBob, dude.
So then the other thing that this researcher talked about, which is something that was new to me that led me down like a whole nother rabbit hole, is that there are places on the earth that are considered climate or carbon refuges. And sometimes the marine like wildlife of that nearshore environment is a factor as to why it's a refuge. So Chilean Patagonia is considered a climate or carbon refuge between the nearshore environment and the marine ecosystem and the wildlife that use that space. So Chilean Patagonia is like this region is doing more of a carbon sequestration service for the earth than the surrounding areas to it. It's like this little spot is like doing good things, which is like crazy. I think it's cool.
I think that's so cool. I think the more and more we learn about how important whales are, I think like they will play a huge, or they should play a huge role in combating climate change, like in terms of like legislation.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, you know, I think like we've done, you know, incredible things with the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act and things like that. But like as we move forward and progress and address the climate change issues, there should be, I guess, parts of those legislations that involved whales, because like their role is so important.
Yeah, well, and like when those laws were written, no one even knew that that's what
they
whales
don't
did.
know anything. Yeah, exactly. Like imagine if
whale watching.
Yeah.
Honestly, like imagine
but then
if
guess
we
what?
didn't. What?
You take them whale watching, they get seasick. Now they hate whales. And now they're just like, screw it, get rid of all the whales.
Yeah, they're like, I'm tired of this. Get rid of the whole ocean.
Well, like
No, it's our whole
imagine if
planet.
imagine if they never made those like, protections, or like whales weren't protected worldwide.
Yeah.
Imagine how worse
Yeah.
off our climate issue would be.
Yeah.
And
Well-
it's tough to say because like, we all work on boats and we all drive cars that eat up gasoline and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I think we're also at the forefront of the possibilities of like, I think biorestoration is something that we look over so much when we address how we can help nature and like, move the climate issue in the right direction. Like when you just let the environment do what it's supposed to do, it can do magical things. And I think that is something that is really overlooked.
Slater's gonna explode.
Well, just like, okay,
Well, it's like we talk with Jeff about it all the time. Remember in the Salish Sea about just letting the environment do its thing. Like if you protect the environment, the fish will come back.
I mean, I'm very surprised that there is actually any blue whales. Like,
oh, for sure, it's
like
incredible.
when you look at it like this way, like how they write it in this thing. Imagine you have 300 Facebook friends, and that's the total population of your species, and now all of them are gone. So you're down to 1%. So you have three left in your species. Now, what do you mean they're going to come back? And then in what, 30 years, 1960 or 50 years? It's only been 50 years. So
it's crazy.
What do you expect them to make 100,000 blue whales in 50 years?
But think about it. It's great that they actually like that whalers moved down like the whale chain, because if they didn't leave the blue whales alone, they probably would have wiped them all out. But luckily they got so rare that.
Yeah, I think the 1% was like the unattainable part.
I think that they just it got so thin that they weren't seeing them anymore, so they moved on to other things.
Yeah,
I don't think it was by choice.
I mean, it's true. If that's not sign for hope and like an urgent call to action, I don't know what the hell is, right? Like if these animals have survived from a 99% population decimation by people and they're still here, like what are we doing? I
know they're fighting ships off, they're fighting freaking who knows.
Literally, like whales are doing everything for our planet. Like that's incredible to really think about.
And it's not lost on me that we burn up a bunch of dead dinosaurs to go look at these whales, right?
It's like
not. So then it comes into like this whole weighing.
I think we're working on that. We'll get into
and I do think that technology and legislation are kind of moving in the right direction. I do think there's lots of room for improvement for that. But I think like if you're going to burn up a bunch of dead dinosaurs to go teach people about whales, you really are obligated to do a good job to inspire people to protect them. Yeah. Like, I feel like that should be like kind of a code of ethics thing that ecotourism has, is like, we have an impact on the environment. And so we need to create an experience that's so inspirational that people go forward and take action when they go home, which Slater's point is very true. When they go out and they get seasick, you immediately lose that opportunity, which sucks. Like, cause we don't really have a whole lot of control over it, right?
You got to take out their husband or their wives
or their kids. Cause little kids hardly ever get seasick. I mean, they do, but not nearly as often as adults.
Cause then if they're like, oh, this is amazing, then they're like, all right, we gotta save it. We gotta
save it. And then also doing things like podcasts or art or, other ways to raise awareness on land where maybe your fossil fuel burden is not so high. I mean, even a podcast costs fossil fuels, like to everything with technology still burns fossil fuels. But
that's the thing. It's just like, you got to get off the dependence there. Like even if we like a huge goal of mine in life is to have a car and a boat that is electric, that runs off the sun, like having solar panels of my own one day that I can put on a house and having that whole setup going. But even if I wanted to try to attain that right now, right? If I wanted to go out and spend my life savings on an electric car, it's still be coming from the grid. It's still coming from burned off fossil fuels, right? Yeah. So it's the whole issue of,
we need a systematic level of change.
And it's got to be affordable, first off.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Things that are better for the environment are like 100 times more expensive. Like,
totally.
Well, and
it's just like eating vegan. Being vegan is sometimes more expensive. Like
Yeah.
if you go to a restaurant, you order a salad, it's gonna be the same price if you order a burger. Like,
But also you look at the environmental impacts of like lithium ion batteries and the mining of
Yeah.
lithium. It's like it's almost just as bad, if not worse, for the environment than burning fossil fuels. And there's no good recycling technology and there's no recapture technology. And again, you go to charge whatever you have running off those batteries, and it may still be coming from fossil fuels.
that's
Fossil
the big
fuels,
argument with the cars right now. It's like they're not
Yeah.
actually better for the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then a lot of these things have components made of plastic. Well, guess where plastic comes from? Fossil fuels.
Literally my whole freaking 4 years, three and
Your whole-
8/10 years of college was about these subjects, and it's just so frustrating.
I mean, I definitely think that taking small actions is still important. It's worthwhile. Buying local not only reduces your impact on the environment, also supports your local economy. Really think about where your products are coming from and can you make them last longer between purchases? Where does your food come from? What kind of impacts are you having on the environment? Put the environment in your decision-making process. Yeah,
When
carpool.
Caitlin
Ride
moves
your
back
bike.
here, I will gladly get a ride to Moss Landing with you every day. Look, Adam, if you move up here, think about how much of the planet we could save by all three carpooling to get on the boat every day.
It's true. I do spend a lot of money in gas going to Monterey.
Well, and like when I lived, so that's always a big priority for me, no matter where I live. Like I walk to work here in Massachusetts, and I rode my bike to work in California.
Mhm.
And the first season in Hawaii, I rode a scooter, which got like 40 miles to the gallon. I mean, it was definitely not very safe riding on Sugar
That
Beach,
place-
You made a
especially at night.
sacrifice.
Dude, it's
Yeah.
so windy right there. I seen
Oh,
her
God.
riding that thing against the wind. She was just doing a wheelie the whole way.
But and then like when I live in Maui, I try to not Amazon anything. Like I try to not order anything online.
Yeah.
I try to just find it on the island somewhere because it's already part of a scheduled shipment. I don't want to have to add a burden of another shipment to the island. That whole concept, it just blows my mind. The island is
It does.
70% fueled by diesel that gets shipped to the island. I'm just like, are you kidding me? So anyways, so to kind of wrap up
I
this
thought we were done with
episode-
doom and gloom.
Has our podcast ever not been doom and gloom?
Welcome to the
Literally
sad
ever.
stuff. We should just
Welcome to
rename it the
Doom and
sad stuff.
Gloom
The
podcast.
sad podcast.
The most positive thing about our podcast, honestly, is our sightings. Any news article we talk about whales is never positive. Unless they find out something new.
Well, it is positive. Think about the freaking blue whales, dude. We almost killed them, but now they're back in action. We freaking
Yeah.
see blue whales all the time in the summer. California
There
is
is a
amazing.
glimmer
I'm
of
so
light.
thankful for that.
There's a glimmer of light. in
Yeah,
all of
you
these
gotta
articles.
turn that glimmer and make it into a freaking.
Mostly it's
Hell
us
on
trying to
fire.
spin it. The article
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily spin it. We spin it by the end
Yeah.
to try
Well,
and
like-
get there.
Makes
Okay,
you
so
respect
here's-
blue whales a little more.
It
Here's
does, for
the last
sure.
article for this episode is hopefully not too doom and gloom. So other places around the world, not just Chile and Patagonia, have thought about cetaceans' role with climate change and like thinking creatively about how to come up with some metrics of a changing climate. So this study came out of the UK, and it's called Sentinels as Cetaceans as Sentinels for Informing Climate Change Policy in UK Waters. So, I mean, they did get their data from stranded dolphins, but they turned it into something that is informative. So they studied stranding data of 4 different species in the UK and used it as a climate impact proxy for waters around the British Isles. So they studied Atlantic white-sided dolphins, white-beaked dolphins, striped dolphins, and short-beaked common dolphins. And the occurrences of strandings were very closely related to a factor of temperatures going on in the open ocean. So on colder phase events, they had more strandings of cold water species like white-beaked dolphins and Atlantic white-sided dolphins. But on warmer phase events, they had more strandings of striped dolphins and short-beaked common dolphins. So the species that kind of matches like their use of space is based on temperature, and then like the sea surface temperatures that were recorded around the British Isles when these strandings would happen. And so
Weird.
now they're saying that these dolphins can be an indicator species, kind of like a canary in the coal mine type of thing.
Pictures.
Do you
It's
guys
kind
know
of-
what that? Do you know
yeah.
what that phrase is?
Yeah, that my in my coral tank, my Kenya tree is my canary in the coal. If that one goes out, rest of my corals are out.
The
But-
canary stops singing, get out of the mine.
Okay, so it's so funny that the cold, like, because whitebeak and Atlantic whiteside dolphins, I feel like are more seen in colder waters, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
so imagine it. So is it not because it's getting too cold though? It's just
No, it's just that those animals are using the space around the islands when the waters are colder, and then the warmer water species are coming in when the waters warm up. So you're more, because there's more dolphins around during those time periods, you're more likely to have a stranding of that species.
Oh.
It's kind of
what
like
is
in
the cause?
Monterey.
I know, but that makes sense. It's like obviously
Yeah.
the cold ones are going to be during the cold time, and the warm ones
Yeah.
going to be during the warm.
So what
But
they're saying is
causing what is causing the strandings?
it's a wide variety of things. They're not linked to necessarily these temperature events. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
more like the presence of these
It's
dolphins.
abundance. Yeah.
Yeah, is an indicator of like kind of ground truthing the sea surface
temperature.
temperature.
Yeah.
Kind of like in Monterey in the spring, you see a lot of Pacific white-sided dolphins and northern right whale dolphins because they're more cold water common species. And so when the water's cold in the spring, you see them. And then in the fall and winter, when things warm up, you see common dolphins in Monterey Bay more often.
Can you back it up, Kaylin? Adam, how about the fact that when the water gets warmer here during the winter, can you explain that science? I can't.
No, I
I mean, I
can't.
know why, but it's so
I
funny
can't.
to me that like we're more likely to see common dolphins now or like in the winter than we are in other months. It's like,
Because
dude,
of
what?
upwelling.
Yeah, it's because we're getting all this south wind now and it's easterly wind, huh?
Yeah,
And,
but also the water layers are stratifying in the fall and winter because you're not getting that mixing from upwelling. And so the water layers kind of settle back out and the cold water goes back to the
Oh.
bottom where it's supposed to be. And the
'Cause
warm
there's
water
less
sits on
wind?
the top. Yeah, so when you get northwest wind and then the direction of the spin of
The
the earth,
northwesterlies. Yes.
the northwest wind pulls, because of the spin of the earth and the wind
Yes.
combined, pulls the surface water offshore.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Oh.
deep water comes up to the surface to replace it physically, but that deep water is colder.
Cold. Yeah.
So that's the upwelling cycle, is where deep water is coming to the surface and then it creates a temperature change, and it also
Gotcha.
brings nutrients with it to the surface.
That
and then
makes
it brings the
sense. You
anchovies,
just-
and it brings lunch-eating humpbacks, and then we all get happy.
It makes sense. you just think like to the average person, to somebody
Yeah.
who's not an ocean goer, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, in the winter it's colder and
Yeah,
windier,
right,
so you'd think
right.
that you'd get
Yeah, like what do you mean?
Cold
It
water
just rained
species.
last night. It probably got down to 50-some degrees, and
And-
now you're gonna tell me the water's warmer than normal?
And in areas like here off the Gulf of Maine, where the upwelling effect is a lot weaker, that's true.
because you've got the Gulf Stream.
Right. And so things just move differently around this area, where in the summer it will be over 70 degrees. And then in the winter, it's like low
Dang,
40s.
dude. We're so smart. Look at us
But
talking
you
upwelling and
The thing is
Gulf
the
streams
word
and-
stratify is what got me there. Okay.
you know what a stratified water column is,
El
dude?
Nino brings surface heat from the west and stratifies the ocean layers, dude.
Oh, yeah. So then when you have an El Nino effect,
Yeah.
you have a warmer phase in the northern Pacific Ocean because that cycle's disrupted.
I Googled it.
Yeah,
Caitlin.
because the warm water sloshes back from the warm water blob in the eastern Pacific, shoots all the way western Pacific, shoots all the way across here to the eastern Pacific,
Yeah.
goes
Yeah.
up through the Southern California countercurrent, hits us, and there's no anchovies, and then we cry because there's no lunch feeding.
Yeah.
yeah,
But there's
then
lots
we
of
get a
common
big
dolphins.
aggregation of whales. So it's like a negative plus, because that was some of the
Negative
best.
plus.
that was
Well,
some of the
because
best whale
El
watching.
Nino, because they come closer to shore, because the anchovies come closer to shore.
Yeah, well, especially with the warm water blob, that's what a lot of scientists are starting to think happen, is that these colder, quote unquote, places like
Areas.
Monterey Bay is where the fish gathered, got pushed in by the temperature, but that meant that was the only fish
Only
left.
spot for the yeah.
And so then all the wildlife congregated in this very small area too, because they were there to eat.
Is that gonna
I
happen
love-
again anytime soon?
I think that events like that are going to become more and more
Much more common,
commonplace
yes.
as we continue to deal with
They're
a
not
changing
good, though?
climate. No, I
Damn.
don't think so, because you look at like
It's not
anchovies.
right.
You're looking at a species of fish that used to populate most of the California current, and if they're being pushed into smaller and smaller areas and your current circulation is becoming narrower and narrower, those fish are not going to have that same range anymore.
Yeah.
So
So
then
right
like
now it's technically a healthier ocean, not healthier, but like it's more of a normal year. That's why the whales are more spread out.
right.
Spread
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Oh,
Dude, think about it. There's
man.
freaking whales from Santa Barbara all along Avila Beach, Morro Bay, the whole Central Coast, all the way up to Monterey, Farallon Islands,
Eureka,
up to Washington.
Oregon, Washington.
I mean,
Yeah, they're spread out.
There was still whales like that during
But
the
it
warm
wasn't
water
the
event,
same
but they were
numbers.
much more concentrated from like Avila to the Farallons.
I wonder how
Yeah.
many whales were sighted that year and haven't been seen since that year. Since
You
like
should
15.
You should ask Ted that,
Ted.
because I think that did happen. Actually, a lot of those whales have not
I
been
wonder if
seen
they
on a
could
regular
run
basis.
I wonder if they could run that stuff on the back end, like run
Dude, I love
14 matches and 16 matches. You know what I mean, or 17.
I think he probably can pull a report like that.
That would be sick.
I won't speak
love-
for him, but I think he probably can.
I love sciencey conversations with Caitlin that I can keep up with. Because sometimes I can't. I'm like,
You're like, what is that?
isotopic degradation? What?
Yeah. I try to not get too nitty gritty into it because I want everybody to be able to understand.
When we're talking about El Nino, dude, I took a whole course in El Nino, dude. I'll tell you all the facts left, right, and center.
So, yeah, that's part one of thinking about carbon sinks and whales and fossil fuels. And man, we got to do better for our oceans. And I think if more people can shift, more governments can shift towards a concept of ecosystem-based management.
That's what it's about.
For quotas and things, and continue to add variables to those models as we learn more, that we're going to start to move in the right direction. But like there really has to be a sense of urgency on the government, because nothing happens on a reasonable timescale, in my opinion, when it's government run. But they're the ones in charge. People are going to do what they're legally supposed to be doing. And so like, how do we move the needle? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I think it's great to have these goals set in place for like CO2 emission decreases and stuff like that, and a shift to electrical systems and all that stuff. But I also think it's equally as important that we rely on our oceans to do a lot of the work for us. Like at the end of the day, it should be planet water. Like the oceans play such a pivotal role in addressing the climate. And the more and more we look into like bioremediation and how if you just let the oceans be productive and protect the life in the oceans, then like it'll all work out. The ecosystems will all balance each other out. The CO2 in the atmosphere will be balanced out by the CO2 in the ocean. Ocean acidification will hopefully decrease, all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, we do, I think, really need to focus on putting some of that into legislative writing. Like, I think it's really as important.
Yeah. And I think the way that people have power there is to really, when it comes to like election time, know what candidate stances are on that. You know, you need to choose from the local level
like
all the way up to the federal level.
It just sucks that it's like, well, I feel like the ocean, like even in California, it's like out of people's minds. Like, like people don't connect ocean to elections or ocean to politics.
But those are the people that are in charge of this stuff. Isn't that crazy?
Those two should be linked.
They need more departments like that are, you know, like
absolutely there should be
but I feel like they do have one. It's called NOAA, and
and NOAA's
how far does that get up the chain
freaking
before it just doesn't get anywhere?
Yeah.
Well, regardless, NOAA's a freaking mess in itself always.
Well, and NIMS is their parent organization, and that's even more of a mess. I mean, why is your National Marine Fisheries Service in lawsuits all the time across the country? Like what? I mean, I know that's how this country functions, but still, it's just like it kind of boggles your mind. So anyways, be informed, be nice to the planet, go look at the ocean.
Go look at some freaking whales on
Go
April 22nd, 23rd, and 24th.
Or go look at some whales before then.
I got trips open all winter.
Just, you know, take a minute and appreciate what the environment does for us. I mean, the ocean literally is the planet's heartbeat
Everything.
and lungs.
Everything.
Like, our planet would not work if it did not have the ocean. So take a minute to appreciate it. Do something nice for it today. Whatever that is.
And tomorrow.
And the next day. And the next day.
And the day after that.
So that's it for this episode. Next week we will have part 2, which kind of plays off the topics in part 1. There, you're not obligated to listen to both in the right order, but it does make a little more sense if it's in the right order. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you for part 2 of Sinking Carbon.
And no, I will not get my hair cut before that episode because we're recording it right now.
We'll see you in another episode.
Bye, everyone.
See you in 1 minute. Later.